Hey everyone, welcome to Season 2 of the HeartWay podcast. And this season, it's going to be a little bit different than last season because we're going to be doing a lot more interviews, which last season we didn't do any interviews. It was just me, Jody, speaking the whole time. We are going to address different topics this time, this season. And if you want us to address a specific topic this season or next, you can submit that to my email at jodie@heartwaycare.org. So today, I have my wife, Gabby, here with me today. She is my Priscilla, and we're missionaries sent out together to do both Russian ministries online and HeartWay as pastor and missionary caregivers. And in this episode today, we are going to discuss crisis in ministry, crisis in the church, and we're going to look at kind of the biblical response behind crisis and how we can prepare for that, and look at some different crises we might face. And also we're going to see how Gabby might be able to help ministers and churches with crises. So Gabby, what are some crises that pastors and missionaries might face?
Okay, so a crisis would be something, for an organization would be something that would cause, first of all, danger or concern for people in the organization or the people that the organization is trying to reach, like customers. But it doesn't just stop there. It also goes to monetary losses and reputational damage. And I think that's a lot of times where maybe churches don't focus on very much. So we're really good at seeing maybe an armed intruder as a crisis, but we're not so much good at seeing maybe if there is a pastor that has a moral failing. That can be a crisis for a church. That can cause a church to lose its reputation in the community, and it can cause a church to split, and so it could cause financial damage. Another crisis that a church might face is maybe a sudden death of one of its leaders, either a pastor or a prominent deacon or Sunday school teacher. These things do happen in churches. So these are just a few. And of course there are, COVID is a crisis that every church has dealt with here lately. So that's a very real big crisis that churches are dealing with even right now.
And also, right, our church that we're working with in St. Petersburg, Russia, they're kind of all over the place right now, geographically speaking, because of the crisis between Russia and Ukraine right now. So if you look at it on a global scale, even in those situations, that's another crisis that I thought of.
For sure.
So is there something that pastors and missionaries can do to help prepare for crises and in the midst of crises?
So in the secular world, organizations, especially large organizations and companies, have developed this kind of strategy where they come up with, it's called a crisis management plan. And so the crisis management plan will start before the crisis begins. In the pre-crisis planning phase, an organization will come up with ideas that they think could possibly be a crisis that their organization could have. And then they come up with ways to try to avoid that crisis. Obviously, you're not going to be able to avoid all crises because that's kind of the nature of crises. They come up out of nowhere sometimes. But during this pre-crisis planning, you would maybe put people in positions to act swiftly when a crisis happens. So for example, if you had somebody that was really good with social media, you could start talking to this person now to ask them, okay, so if a tornado hits our community and we need to quickly go into action and gather our members in our church, would you be willing to be on call so that I can contact you and say, hey, can you do a mass social media post about bringing all of our church together at a certain time after this crisis? So having these people in place before a crisis happens makes this movement quicker. You're able to reach your congregation and the community at a much quicker pace. And it's normally more organized and more productive. Mm-hmm. Does that answer the question?
Yeah, and that seems like it would be super beneficial. A lot of, in the midst, when I'm thinking about this, in the midst of a crisis, things kind of go chaotic and people try to do what they can, and there's not a whole lot of collaboration and cooperation amongst the churches until kind of after the fact, more as kind of a recovery. And so you're saying that we can maybe plan a little beforehand and think through this beforehand, so we don't just have so much of a post response.
And I would say maybe we aren't even very good at so normally you could have a pre-crisis planning, you have a crisis response, is like what's happening during a crisis, and then you have a post-crisis evaluation. So we're really good at crisis response in a lot of our churches, but we're not very good at the pre-crisis planning and the post-crisis evaluation. But the benefits of pre-crisis planning is that our stakeholders, or the people that our churches are trying to reach, are not just people in our church building. They're not the only people that we're called to serve. We're made to reach out to our communities. And so by having a little forethought, you're able to take care of your church and think outside to your community and take care of your community needs also, which is what we're called to do.
Yeah, so we can better minister to those around us and reach out more effectively if we plan for crises before they take place. That makes a lot of sense to me. So Gabby, would you say, this is biblical? I think we obviously see some of the biblical tie-ins, but crisis management plans, like you said, that's kind of a secular term that's developed. So how would you explain a crisis management plan biblically?
Mm-hmm. So, if you look through the Bible, God is a planner. And thankfully, in some of the stories, we're actually able to see God's plans. And I think Noah is a great example of God doing a crisis management plan. So you have the pre-crisis phase where God's having Noah build the ark and prepare for the crisis. And then, of course, during the flood, you have the crisis response. Noah gets in the boat. He has prepared. He has the food for the animals. He has the spaces for his family. He weathers the storm because he's following God's guidance. He's done what God has told him to do. And then afterwards, how do we know that God will never flood the earth again? He's given us a rainbow. So God evaluated his plan and decided that he never wants to destroy the earth like that again, and then gave us a promise of a rainbow to show us that that's not how he's ever going to destroy the earth. He's never going to flood the earth again. So even God did an evaluation of his crisis that he created. He did an evaluation and came to a conclusion. So like a post-crisis evaluation is a really important thing, and I think we haven't touched on it much, but there's an example of one of our churches. I don't want to give specifics, but in this church, they lost a leader in their church. And I talked with this pastor, and they very wisely went through this crisis very well. They did a lot of really great things. And one things that really stood out to me is that they did do a post-crisis evaluation when they were done. There wasn't in maybe those correct terminology, because those are kind of weird terminologies for us. But in this post-crisis evaluation, they decided that they were going to make sure that all of their leaders had life insurance, because when their associate pastor passed away, they had to focus so much on giving the widow, making sure the widow was taken care of monetarily, that it kind of took away from their ability to minister to her on a level that she needed because she had just lost her husband. They had to focus so much on making sure that she was going to be taken care of financially. So they were able to evaluate how they responded in that crisis and make changes. So in the future, if somebody on their staff passes away, money will be taken care of. They can focus on ministering to the family in a different way. And this is because they were able to evaluate their plans and make changes for the future.
Yeah, that makes sense. And I like the biblical tie-in to Noah. I think that all makes sense. I see planning all over the Bible. And then on the flip side, when we don't plan, this can affect our ministry negatively and how the world views us negatively, because they see us as unprepared, and yet as Christians we should be very prepared. All the time we're being told again and again to prepare for Christ's coming, and so this can be done even in times of crises, and should definitely be done in times of crises. So Gabby, how can you help you personally in crisis management, plan formation, and in crises in general for churches and for pastors and missionaries?
Okay, so this has kind of become, right now I'm finishing up a degree in social science, and this has kind of become my main focus of study these last couple of semesters. I've had a really great professor that is pretty known for this area of study, and she's kind of taken me under her wing. And I just saw so much good in it that could help our churches and our missionaries, that I just jumped on the chance to study underneath her teachings. And so ways that I could help is, crisis management plans are going to be very personalized to the churches, but there are some overreaching similarities between churches. And I recently did a research project over this, and I got some really great information from a lot of churches that participated. And so with this information, I could definitely help churches develop crisis management plans. I could help them do some training on, maybe you're not so great at social media or how to use social media, doing some training to learn how to better use that. Or maybe you need help finding somebody that can do money, like figuring out your money, finding people that can help on those aspects during a crisis. So thinking through insurances and security. There's just so many things that you can think through when you're thinking through a crisis management plan. And so I've been trained to be able to do this. And so writing a crisis management plan to be able to act upon it quickly when a crisis hits is something that I feel very confident in doing for churches.
Okay, what about for missionaries?
So missionaries are a special case because they aren't an organization specifically. They're very individual. They're obviously individuals. But with that said, there are some common things that can happen to a missionary. So, for example, having a plan in place for if all of a sudden the economy in the country that you're in decides to crash and you can no longer withdraw money from the ATM. Do you have a plan in place for that? So instead of maybe a missionary having to ask their treasurer, can I withdraw extra money because I have a chance to withdraw extra money at this ATM? Instead of having to ask that specific treasurer and then the treasurer having to go and ask the church, you can have a plan in place where if certain things happen in the economy, this missionary has the freedom to withdraw this amount of money based off of a need, if they need to. So having that kind of plan in place, or maybe there's you make a plan in advance about civil unrest. So the government sends out warnings to foreigners living in foreign countries, and maybe you and your ascending church and their missionary can sit down and decide, okay, so at this point when the government sends out this warning to us, this is my sign to say I need to get out of the country. Before then, you can have other steps to kind of prepare for the possibility, but I'm not leaving until I get this notice. But once I get this notice, I must leave the country. And having these plans in place for missionaries kind of takes away the emotional response, because it is so emotional at that moment. And there's so many things pulling you at that moment that you don't always make the wisest choices. So having these kind of plans in place before you send your missionary on the field can really be beneficial when those times do come.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense to me. I think we can learn a lot from crisis management plans. I know it's difficult sometimes to make decisions, especially life-changing and ministry-changing decisions in the midst of stressful times or when you're not thinking clearly, which would be in a time of crisis. I remember, Gabby, you and I, we made a pact not to make any life-changing decisions in Russia during the winter because we knew that was a more stressful time and a dark time, and so things might seem more tempting at that time in terms of life changes and things, and so we decided not to make any major decisions for our life in the winter of Russia. And so I think, yeah, crisis management plans, they're biblical. They can help your church. They can help you as a pastor to lead and guide your church and to minister better in times of crisis. And also for missionaries and sending churches, you can plan better and manage the crisis better when they do come up for your missionary. And so it's wise to start thinking through this stuff now and taking advantage of Gabby and the HeartWay pastor and missionary caregiver ministry to help in these ways. So I recommend doing that. We're here to help you guys. And so this has been episode 1 of season 2 of the HeartWay podcast, where we help with problems at the source. Thank you.